off, dude. Don't come through the door. I will shoot.
Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I really deeply appreciate it. I've got a great interview with Chuck Michel to talk about the Rahimi case the Supreme Court has agreed to hear. Yes, I know Rahimi's not a great guy, and yes, I know the Rahimi case is probably not a great case, but it's the one they're going to hear. And it is very, very important and vital that we fight that case well and effectively, and that in many cases we win. I think there's some great positives that can come out of it. Chuck will explain that to you in more detail here in just a second. In the meantime, please do check out these alternative places, because YouTube can be sketchy, and that way you won't lose track of me in case YouTube deletes a video or boots me out entirely or whatever. All right, let's go talk to Chuck. Chuck, thank you very much for joining me. I know your time is super busy, but this is a very, very important subject. This Rahimi case has me a little concerned because the case itself is extremely important to our fight, but people look at this Rahimi cat and realize he's a big-time stinker.
Right.
And I don't think, at first I don't think folks grasp just how important this case is, and that really our focus shouldn't be on the fool whose name is on it, but rather on the issue. So can you explain to us why this case is important and what we need to be doing?
Well, this is the first Second Amendment case that the United States Supreme Court has taken since Bruin. And that was just, a year ago that was decided. So it's a big break from where we were after Heller came out in 2008. And then we didn't see Bruin until 2022. So there was Heller, 2008. So there was a long break because there were some justices on the Supreme Court that didn't want to get into the Second Amendment again. But now when Kennedy and there were some changes on the court, they took that Bruin decision and gave us a great ruling, which laid out the right test, straightened out a lot of stuff that the courts had gotten wrong from misinterpreting Heller, the Heller case. And so we thought everything was golden. But now, since Bruin came down, a lot of the courts that are inclined to uphold gun control laws, as unconstitutional as they may be, have twisted the Bruin analysis, the Bruin test, and really kind of made it something that it wasn't supposed to be. So this Rahimi case now that has been accepted by the Supreme Court, that's a challenge to a blanket ban on firearm possession by anybody who has a restraining order out against them. Now, Mr. Rahimi is not the poster child for the Second Amendment. He has state court criminal charges pending against him for violent acts, and he pretty much fairly clear that it is a violent guy. So probably he might not be the right guy to be able to, he might be the right guy to take away his individual right to keep and bear arms because he's not exercising that right responsibly. But the question is, can you blanket ban an entire class of people without looking at them individually and ban them from possessing firearms? And that's what this case is really about. Now, remember, in the Heller case, the issue was handguns in the home for self-defense. In the Bruin case, the issue was handguns in public for self-defense. So although they ruled on the issue of whether or not you had to have a special cause or special privilege, special need to get a CCW, the real question was, what's the right approach to making a Second Amendment analysis of any challenged law? And Bruin answered that question, but it didn't answer every aspect of that question. So there's still these unanswered questions which Rahimi could conceivably answer. For example, but the point is, Monday, almost 40 amicus briefs, friend of the court briefs, were filed with the United States Supreme Court supporting the state, supporting the government, and saying that the government should be able to just blanket ban a whole category of people from possessing firearms. So this raises issues about right now, if you use marijuana, you can't possess firearms. If you have certain nonviolent misdemeanor or felony convictions, you can't possess firearms. If you have have any kind of a restraining order against you, you can't possess firearms.
So, okay, so I'm sitting here watching this, and I'm thinking to myself, I've never committed a crime. I'm not a felon. I've never been convicted of a misdemeanor. I can't imagine a situation where somebody's going to have a temporary restraining order against me. I don't smoke pot. I don't do anything like that. I've never done anything like that. It was never me. It would never be me, and I would never date anybody who does. Okay. And so I don't care.
Yeah.
Why should that person get involved right here? I know they should, but can you help us out? Where could this carry into that guy's life?
So because the way this started was they banned firearm possessions for Native Americans because we wanted to be able to steamroll over them. They banned firearm possession from freed slaves. At one point, there was a ban on firearm possession for Catholics. And if you don't care about this one, then the next time the government may ban firearm possession from anybody with a gray beard named Joel. You know what I mean? I mean, they can ban, if they can ban a class without individualized due process, then they can just make up a class. And we know how good they are at that because we've seen how the definition of a semi-automatic has expanded and more semi-automatics are deemed to be assault weapons. So they can ban more and more guns. Remember, it's about banning certain types of guns, certain type of people, and certain places from guns being allowed, mostly. Those are the types of gun laws. So if they can ban a large swath of people from possessing firearms based on some characteristic that is not specific to one person's propensity for violence, then they can just create a class and they will deem you to be a militia or you've seen how they've condemned anybody who advocates for the Second Amendment. They start calling you, anybody who calls himself a patriot, you can't have a gun. You're paramilitary training. You do any kind of training at the range. You're doing paramilitary training. You can't have a gun. That's why you got to care. It's not about Mr. Rahimi. It's about the government's authority to over-characterize a class of people as not worthy of having the Second Amendment right without doing an individual consideration of their circumstances, seeing if they are really the type of person who should not be able to have that, to exercise that right. So you got to care. But beyond that, beyond the specific factual question in this case, there's all kinds of other questions that need to be answered. For example, the amicus parties, the amicus submission briefs are arguing that the right time period is any time up till the 14th Amendment and even after. Remember, this Bruin court said, you got to look at 1791 when the founders passed this. What would they have tolerated in terms of gun control? That's the right thing. They're trying to go back in some of these briefs. They're going back and saying, hey, this is only a militia right. They're actually trying to relitigate Heller and Bruin. They're saying that they're obviously, as usual, they're laying on the emotional appeal, talking about victims. And I don't want to downplay that. Domestic violence is a problem, and it should be, there should be things that you can do to disarm a person if they are committing acts of domestic violence. But that doesn't mean...
but at the same time, that gets used constantly in an erroneous fashion to disarm people who have no business being disarmed.
Every family lawyer
It's just like the pot smoker. How do you tell a guy who smokes pot that he can't have a gun when that's like telling somebody that just bought a 6-pack of beer they can't own a gun?
Every family lawyer
It doesn't make any sense.
That in a divorce, they can get a strategic advantage by accusing the other guy. Look at...
it happens every day.
Look at Depp versus whatever her name was.
Oh, Johnny Depp. Yeah, I can't think of that chick's name, but yeah, it was crazy.
Amber Heard.
Amber Heard, right? Yeah.
He beat me, and that's used all the time falsely by women and men,
right?
To take advantage of the court system and harass the guy. You get accused of that. You're presumptively not a fit parent, and you lose your gun rights. But so they don't want to acknowledge the social utility of firearms, and these briefs do not. They say there is no social utility. They are not valuable self-defense tools. They play up the emotional, the victimization, and that's all true. But don't forget who else becomes a victim when you can't defend yourself with a firearm, when you don't have that choice. So they want to go back to a balancing test. and say the government says that these people are dangerous. All these people in this entire class, and not just domestic violence restraining orders or restraining orders in general, but any other class. The government should be able to condemn a whole class of people, whether it's Native Americans or freed slaves or Catholics or people with a restraining order or people who smoke pot. That's just the start. If this is where the government gets its foot in the door, where it can classify a whole segment of people as not worthy of the Second Amendment right, you're going to find yourself in that class one of these days as they move down the agenda to banning firearms entirely.
You know, we hear the argument all the time that it's a slippery slope, but this strikes me as the classic slippery slope. I mean, it's the slipperiest of slopes. It's interesting. You were talking about the briefs. So let me pull those up real quick and just scroll through them. If you look on, this is the Supreme Court of the United States website. But you get down here to August, about August, let me see here. August, August 17th.
About 17th.
Yeah. August 17th. So from this point forward, I start scrolling through these. It's like, holy smoke. Now, I guess my question to you, Chuck, is do you have to respond to these, each one individually, if you're going to file a brief? How does that work?
We'll group the topics. And we were already in contact. Second Amendment Law Center is coordinating an amicus brief campaign in response to the points raised here. We don't do individual responses to individual briefs, but we will pick out the baloney that's raised in a bunch of those briefs and the government's briefs, and try and get the court to clarify some of the things that the state governments that are defending gun laws have been mischaracterizing as the ruling from Bruen. So, for example, the Bruen case says you do two things. First, you ask whether the conduct that's being challenged or that's at issue is covered by the text of the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. And the state is trying to say, well, the only arms that the Second Amendment covers are guns that are commonly used for self-defense. See, they've turned the whole Bruen analysis on its head. Bruen dealt with self-defense, as I said before, and handguns in public, but that's not all. Matched grade target rifles are covered by the Second Amendment. Those are arms that the Second Amendment protects. So are hunting rifles. It's not just self-defense. There's other lawful purposes that go along with exercising your Second Amendment right. And so that's an example of the type of thing. It's not just about this person or being able to condemn a class from gun ownership. It's about the test. And that's what we got out of Bruen, a separate and apart from the ruling that said you can't require a special need to get a permit to carry in public. The Bruen case laid out that appropriate test that applies in all cases. If Rahimi can be used to clean up some of the misinterpretations that are being done by the courts of appeal in other Second Amendment cases, like semi-autos, like standard cap magazines, like sensitive places, that slippery slope, that ever expanding, we're going to make more and more people prohibited. We're going to condemn, this Ruger 1022, that's an assault weapon too. And our sensitive places, any place within 1,000 feet of a church, a school, or a stop sign is a sensitive place. They just make them bigger and bigger and bigger, so there's less and less of an area, or the less people or less guns, less types of firearms that people can possess and be protected by the Second Amendment. That's the gambit. That's the strategy to try and water down your Second Amendment rights.
Oh, every day, all day long, as much as possible. This whole list of, I scrolled through that list. What is there, like 35 or 40 of them or something? Is that normal to see that volume of amicus briefs filed like that? Is that a normal practice?
Well, it is. Most Supreme Court cases draw a lot of amicus briefs. Heller, I think there were 60. So
wow.
On a case like this, it's a high-profile case, and a lot of these groups see it as their opportunity to try and water down Bruen. So they're piling on because they do not like Bruen if it's applied faithfully. And some courts are applying it faithfully. The Ninth Circuit just applied it faithfully in a butterfly knife case.
Yeah, the ball is bow song, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah, but they got it. But at the same time, the one that was just argued the other day, they're making the whole argument. They're trying to weasel this. One of the justices, and we'll talk about that probably tomorrow or another day, but one of the justices is trying like mad to figure out a way to kind of go back to that whole rational basis.
Right.
To go back to the old way of doing things.
So they're balancing.
Interest balancing. It's
so they can stack the deck. They say it's public safety trumps everything.
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
That's what we're up against. That's why the stakes are so high. And that's why the Second Amendment Law Center is involved. It's the heaviest lift we've had so far, this case.
Well, let me clarify something here, because I know you're the volunteer president of the California Rifle and Pistol Association, and then you're the guy from Michelle and Associates, obviously, the law firm. But the Second Amendment Law Center is a different organization.
Yes.
So are you saying that really it's the Second Amendment Law Center that's involved in this fight while CRPA is in other fights? Is that you talking about?
Well, CRPA will be one of the amici that files an amicus brief in Rahimi. But it is not cool. We're in touch with 30 different groups who are going to file amicus briefs, and we're helping to quality control those briefs, figure out who's going to take what topic, how to divvy up the topics so the briefs are not redundant, what points that were raised in these amicus briefs against us we really need to respond to, how to respond to them. And there's two arguments here, not just the Second Amendment. There's also the due process. That's a whole separate body of law that we've got to brief. So it's a heavy lift. It's a lot more than, in Delaware, we filed a couple of briefs. In Illinois, we coordinated 6 or 7 briefs. We've done this in other states, but this is the biggest project. And the time, it's coming up fast. We're going to have to file our briefs. All the amici are going to have to file their brief in about 4 weeks.
Okay, so here's the reason why I asked the question, because I just wanted clarity, because my viewers are honestly almost en masse very faithful about contributing where contributions need to be made in the fight. I know many of them contribute to CRPA even though they're not in California.
Right,
but I want to make sure
soon. Yeah.
And I love it. But I want to make sure that if we're helping in this particular fight, where do those contributions go? Do they go to CRPA or do they go to the Second Amendment Law Center?
No, they go to the Second Amendment Law Center, which is a 501c3, and you can look at it at 2alc.org. You can see the advisory. I mean, we have all the best lawyers, best and brightest Second Amendment lawyers and experts in the country on our advisory panel. I do not get a salary for this. This is all a pro bono exercise because I'm a true believer. So now there are people that we do have to pay, though, to do some of this heavy lifting and some of this legwork. And so we're doing this is sort of the biggest launch or relaunch for the 2ALC, because this case is so important. And so we're really asking donors to step up now, help us out now. It'll go directly to the people that are writing these briefs and helping to coordinate that effort. And we've got, for those who give us over $75, we've got you a challenge coin for you.
Yay!
Show that you're a member of the team, complete with graphics put together by me, Liberty's Teeth, which is what the Second Amendment has been called. So the challenge coin means you're part of the team. I know you got a few challenge coins.
Oh yeah, okay, all right, hold on. You challenged me on my challenge coins. I got one of the things I've got a buddy of mine. I want to have him make me a rack so I can put them all out there because I have so stinking many of them. So, but I only have a few sitting out here.
You get the rack on Amazon. I have 2 of them on my wall right here next to me.
I know, but he's going to make a customized one. But let me see what I've got sitting back here, just kind of sitting there. Hold on.
There you get the point.
All right, here we go. Let's see. Well, these are, historic. What? Hold on. I get them in
That's a badge, not a challenge coin.
Yeah. It's one that I wore for a long time, and if you don't like that one, there's another one I wore.
That's a badge.
But we got this one.
There you go. Now that's a challenge coin. See, that police department gave its officers challenge coins.
Right.
And a lot of Navy, a lot of ships.
Hey, I have a CRPA challenge coin in the shape of a beer bottle opener.
Some people love that. Some people hate that. I'm an old school guy. I want the round coin. And by the way, if you meet somebody,
by the way, the other thing that's cool to put on your challenge coin thing is pins.
That insignia.
Like that one from the sheriff's department, and sometimes patches.
Yeah.
No, I was not. I was never with the Secret Service. This is from a student of mine, so it's kind of
okay.
Cool.
Anybody who gives enough money, I'm going to get them a Second Amendment Law Center patch too. Okay. But
Okay.
the point is for right now.
Okay, you're watching the show. See what I just did for you?
I'll make you a badge. I don't know. We don't need no stinking badges.
That's
The great
hilarious.
thing
I
about challenge
don't need
coins
no
was
stinking badges.
if you had a guy on a ship and he saw one of his shipmates in a bar and he pulls out his challenge coin, but his shipmate doesn't have that challenge coin, he's got to buy you a drink.
You got to
if
buy
you
a
run
drink.
into
That's
another
right.
Second Amendment Law Center supporter and he doesn't have his challenge coin, including me, by the way, I'll probably be the one who gets challenged most often. I got to buy you a drink. So,
I'm going to make sure I've got, I'll get one, and I'm going to make sure I got it in my pocket every time I meet up with you, just in case you don't, because I want the free drink.
I'd buy you the drink anyway, Joel, but it'd be more fun that way. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
The point is, help us out, folks. It's the Supreme Court.
It's blurry there. Hold it up again so it can be seen. There you go. And flip it over now. Oh, look at that. Now that's awesome. Look at that. Now you got a clear image.
There's 2A.
That's
but
pretty
this is
cool.
my favorite site, and I actually designed that graphic. That's an
wow.
Oh, it's coming in focus. That's great.
That's great.
Liberty's
Look at that.
Teeth. It's an eagle flying with a couple of American flag ARs behind him.
Yeah.
It's Second Amendment Law Center. Liberty's
Who
Teeth.
knew?
The Second Amendment is Liberty's teeth.
You bet.
George Washington actually didn't say that. He's often attributed with being the one who said that, but some other folks did. And if you can't figure out who, then I'm going to take credit for it. But anyway,
why not?
We do. Now is the time, folks. If you can spare it, the 2ALC. This case is the most important second case in the country right now, and time is short, unfortunately, because that's how fast the Supreme Court works. They're going to have an oral argument probably November. And we will see a decision next June. They'll probably hold it till the end of the court session, although they don't have to.
Now, we actually, when they decided Bruen, you and I talked about this on this show, that we fully anticipated, you said, that judges were going to try to do some legal gymnastics and bend themselves over backwards to figure out a way to squirrel around the rules. And we're beginning to see that. Now, some of them are not. Some of them are just following the Bruen decision faithfully, but some of them are trying to wiggle around the rules. And one of the things you said at that point was that the Supreme Court was going to have to start to clarify those and tighten up that set of rules a little bit. And this is the opportunity to get that to happen. The Supreme Court doesn't take a lot of these cases. So whenever they do, we got to be on top of them, because unlike a circuit court, if the Supreme Court decides it, that's the law of the land across the country.
Right. I remember the government lost in the Fifth Circuit. They lost the case. They're the ones who asked the Supreme Court to take it. So it shows that some of the justices are concerned that they would take this case because they may not want the Second Amendment to be too overbroad in its protections. So we have to fight this to scorched earth, like the third monkey on the ramp to Noah's Ark.
You better throw the second monkey off or you're screwed. All right. But the danger here, it seems to me, as a non-lawyer, I'm just a regular guy, it seems to me is that some of the justices, even the more conservative leaning ones, are going to be concerned because they don't want to take away the state's ability to keep a violent felon from having firearms.
Right.
But at the same time, there are a lot of nonviolent felonies that have nothing to do with any violence at all.
Right, and restraining orders.
Why are those people, or for that matter, some of these misdemeanors like marijuana, right, or restraining orders where there's no due process? I mean, certainly if there's due process and this person has a history of violence against, where he's a danger to himself and others, or she is a danger to himself and others, then yeah, okay, I can see it. But when you have somebody that has no violent history and it's a nonviolent, crime, there's no reason to take that person's right away by just throwing them in the same bucket as everybody else. And that's what's happening.
That's exactly the point. And the government is citing to these racist laws, disarming Native American and freed slaves to justify their ability to do that. That's the historical laws they're looking at. So
you saw the badges back there, so I'm just going to say it. I have no problem with taking a violent felon's firearms rights away from them. I don't have a problem with that. This
I
is a
probably don't
person who
either.
has none.
If he-
And
he's a-
so
if he's a-
if you're watching
he's a
this and you
threat,
got a
yeah.
problem with me about it, then you're going to have a problem with me. But I do have a problem with taking the firearms rights away from a non-violent person, even if they've been convicted of a crime, and certainly have problems with taking guns away from people who have had no hearing. These red flag laws, for example, or TROs or whatever. There's no real process there.
And the courts are so nervous about not taking. We had a case where two neighbors were having a dispute. That one of the neighbors kept going over to other neighbor's property and vandalizing their property. So they put cameras up to catch her in the act. And when they caught her in the act, they sought a restraining order against her to keep her off their property so she wouldn't vandalize their property. She sought a reciprocal restraining order against them for the camera. And so they said, well, we'll reorient the camera so it only shows our property. The judge said, I'm giving you both restraining orders. So our clients couldn't own firearms because they put cameras up on their property to catch their neighbor vandalizing their property.
So everybody with a Ring camera now, right? Jeez.
Yeah. You know, it's not about violence in a vast majority.
And it's not about this Rahimi cat or whatever the heck his name is. That dude, if what they say about him is true, has no business having a weapon of any kind.
They say he's not our poster child.
No, but I mean, it is what it is, right?
The issues in the case, are critical. And you know, if the stars align and the justices align, and I mean particularly Conan Barrett and Roberts, if they get on board here, then we could get a decision that says the government can't just unilaterally take away a whole class of people's rights without due process, or at least give them the ability to get it. You know, maybe set up some. I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they'll give them the ability to get it back. You know, prove they shouldn't have been part of it. With all of this,
even if it is a class of people, it needs to be a very narrowly defined class of people,
and justified,
based upon some justification that there's violent criminal intent by that class of people. So if you have, for example, a person with a history of convictions for violence, that person would fit into that class. So if you have a guy that's been robbing liquor stores with a gun and you know, shot at the cops or whatever, or shot the clerk, that guy doesn't need to have a gun again, even if he ever gets out of prison. But I think we got to narrow it rather than just having this broad swath.
That's where it can be addressed in the criminal court. Like this guy Rahimi has several Texas state court criminal charges pending against him for violent offenses. Go ahead, hammer him. You know,
and the judge should, if that's the case. Yeah. But not the poor guy. I'm still feeling bad for the poor joker who's smoking medical marijuana because he's got cancer or whatever, or the person who just wants to smoke marijuana because that's something that they enjoy. Right? Don't smoke it and then go shooting.
Right.
You know, don't drink Irish whiskey and go shooting either. Right?
We don't want to shoot the dogs with the wolves.
No.
Okay. We go ahead and get the wolves, but don't just pass a law that kills a lot of dogs. So
my dad was a deputy sheriff for a while, and he used to say that the law enforcement's job is to deal with the bad people and leave the good people alone to live their lives and be unmolested by either criminals or the government. They don't need to be molested by anybody. And I loved that way of thinking, and that's where the courts need to come down on. Leave the good people alone, unmolested by both government and criminals, and then deal with the bad people and leave it alone. That's it. That's
the bigger picture about how much government, what's the proper role of government in micromanaging everybody's life and telling you how you have to live. And that's
you got a heck of a big difference in the answer, if you ask me, as opposed to gruesome nuisance up in Sacramento.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
And really, this is a microcosm. Second Amendment is the tip of the spear in the fight over America's soul and where America is going to go. The Second Amendment is the last barrier to tyrannical social engineering that the social engineers want to get out of the way, so that they don't have to worry if they shove an agenda down our throats that we don't like. Ultimately, like the King of England did to the
King George. Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think, it's interesting. Rick and I have talked about this a few times, that President George Washington once said that any time the government taxes the people more than 3%, that people have a right to revolt. I think we passed 3%.
that ship sailed.
Yeah, a long time ago. So, our founding fathers, founding folks, fathers, mothers, whatever, could not even envision what we tolerate today from our government. And I suspect they would not tolerate it. But
Right.
they're not around, so we're fighting the battle where we can fight it. So I will put a link, by the way, if you're watching this, I'll put a link in the description, and I'll put it in on YouTube. I'll pin it to the top. If it's on Rumble or wherever else you're at, Twitter, whatever, it'll be in the description or in the title, and you can click on it. That will take you to the Second Amendment Law Center, and you can contribute and get your challenge coin. Hold that up again. No, I don't get paid to do this. I'm a volunteer too. Here we go. So I'm not making any money off this either, but I'm telling you, you want that challenge coin so you can say you were part of history in saving the Second Amendment, because we are in a battle for the heart and soul of our country, and the Second Amendment is a big part of that.
That is not an understatement. You are this is a historic time for the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
If you can participate by contributing or joining the groups, CRPA or any other group that you happen to like, you've become part of history. So, we are fighting for the soul of America. We are fighting for the freedoms of our children. We are fighting for the future of this country. Where are we going to go? How are we going to get there? This is all part of it. This is sort of a little microcosm of that larger debate, but we got to win this one. So help us out.
Chuck, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate you, brother.
Always a pleasure, Joel. We'll see you again soon.
You bet. Take care. Thank you very much for all of your support of Gun Guy TV. I do appreciate it. If you'd like to support further and you would like to join Gun Guy TV crew, you can do that with a link. It is in the description, GunGuyTVcrew.com. It's also available on Patreon and Locals. And Patreon and Locals. And then the podcast, which I'm going to be doing in a couple of days again, is available on Rumble. So if you'd like to check out the Gun Guy TV podcast, a video version, it's on Rumble and Twitter, and the audio version is all over the place. You can find it anywhere. Also, check out the Second Amendment Law Center. That's the place you need to support, as Chuck and I were talking about, if you'd like to help out with this Rahimi case, which is a very big deal. Thank you again for watching. Have a great week, and stay safe.